In the winter of 1902, inside a dim annex of the Vienna Imperial Technical Museum, archivists preparing a minor exhibition discovered a crate whose label had been scraped clean. Dust settled on the wood like frost. Inside lay a single photograph, a bell tower in Pilsen, 1894, standing without its bell, yet the caption beneath insisted the bell had rung daily until 1901. No explanation, just a mismatch of dates, an empty frame where sound once lived. Official catalogues claim the bell had been removed for acoustic modernization, yet the accompanying blueprint showed mechanisms no modernization would require. Spiral channels etched inside the bronze like resonant circuits. Some say these were remnants of an older, forgotten engineering tradition. The room hummed faintly, though no machines ran nearby. History remembers progress, but forgets what it replaced. As the archivist turned off the lights, the photograph flickered, one last glint on metal that was no longer there. By early March 1900, church workers in Saint-Étienne, Lyon recorded that the great bronze bell, Marie Claire, had been lowered for repairs. The official ledger, written in a hurried clerical hand, claimed the removal was routine, necessitated by cracks forming near the lip after decades of use. The day was warm for spring, the air smelled of dust and heated metal, yet a surviving photograph, stamped 1896, shows the same crack already present 4 years before the supposed removal. A contradiction that archivists later noted quietly in the margins. If crack existed earlier, why removal delayed? A machinist, Henri Duval, left a brief note. We were told the bell must be taken, even if it still rings. His uncertainty lingers like a faint vibration. Some researchers have speculated that these removals coincided with early urban electrification, though no ordnance connects them. The bell's final ring was never recorded, yet residents insisted they heard a low hum for days afterward. The tower still stands today, strangely silent, its interior metal brackets untouched since 1900. In October 1901, the Ministry of Culture in Dresden issued a technical directive requiring compliance checks for bell structures exceeding 1 metric ton. The document bears no signature, an anomaly rarely seen in bureaucratic decrees of the era. The pages smell faintly of graphite and old glue. An attached map of Saxony marked 17 bell towers with red circles, though no explanation is given for why these towers were targeted. Some towers had newer bells, others had stood for centuries. The criteria appear inconsistent. A clerk later testified in a private note, "We were instructed to mark towers with the older form. We understood this to mean the spiraled moulds, but no such classification appears in architectural textbooks." Outside, a cold mist settled over the Elbe, muffling sound. The bells destined for removal were said to ring strangely that autumn, slower, deeper, as if resonating with something beyond their own mass. Today, the same towers appear unusually reinforced, though no aftermath reports describe the modifications. The London Acoustic Society attempted a continent-wide census of ringing bells in February 1903, claiming purely academic interest. Their ledger lists over 4,000 bells, yet by the next printing in 1908, more than 600 entries had been crossed out with no explanation. The Society blamed municipal inaccuracies, though one internal letter suggests otherwise. Certain older bells are not to be surveyed again. The guidance comes from above. One entry from Prague, 1891, shows a sketch of a bell with narrow internal fluting, far more elaborate than traditional European casting. Experts say this fluting should weaken the bronze. Instead, travellers describe those bells as impossibly resonant. Some theories suggest these were remnants of pre-industrial acoustic engineering, though official historians dismiss the idea. The old hall where the census was conducted was demolished in 1964. Residents reported hearing metallic echoes in the rubble even after the beams were removed. The census's disappearance marks the end of the official narrative and the beginning of its anomalies. In Krakow, A metalworker's archive dated July 1897 includes blueprints for a bell interior bearing channels and geometric indentations that resemble patterns used in electrical induction decades later. Official annotations claim they were experimental sound dampening ridges, yet their geometry aligns more with frequency modulation diagrams than with acoustic tradition. The Foundry Ledger notes that the bell cast from these plans was removed in 1902, just 5 years after installation. Reasons unknown. A surviving worker's remark, in shaky handwriting, reads, "It rang like no bell we ever made. The vibration pressed on the chest. Hot summer air blurred the ink, leaving smudges like fading echoes." Modern researchers comparing the blueprint to contemporary designs found no precedent. Their shapes seemed too intentional to be decorative, yet too subtle to serve mechanical purpose. Some say these channels could focus resonance, perhaps why such bells drew unexplained attention from officials after 1900. The photograph discovered in Vienna, the empty tower in Pilsen 1894, remains one of the earliest visual contradictions. The accompanying municipal report insists the bell was removed in 1901, yet the image predates the removal by 7 years. A curator recounted, "Either the date is wrong, or the tower was already silent long before the record admits." Cloudy skies cast soft shadows on the empty beam. No remnants of lifting equipment appear. No work logs survive. Some speculate the bell was removed covertly for analysis, possibly due to its unusual metallurgy, described in a traveller's notebook as bronze that glowed faintly at dawn. Chemical tests on similar era European bells showed traces of tin, copper, and small amounts of antimony, but no surviving sample matches the alloy described in the Pilsen rumour. Today, the image remains in the museum, mislabelled and quietly avoided by guides. Its silence feels deliberate. During catalogue restoration in January 1905, archivists in Antwerp found that names of bell donors from 3 maritime churches had been scraped off parish books, neat rectangles of missing ink. According to official statements, this was due to water damage, yet the paper shows clean removal, not warping or staining. One note in the margin, faint and almost erased itself, states, "The old makers had signatures hidden inside." This phrase appears nowhere else in church documentation. Some speculate it refers to the tradition, rare but documented, of embedding maker's marks inside the bell mould itself, unseen unless broken open. A faint smell of salt air permeates the archive. Winter storms shook the building that week, making the hanging lamps sway rhythmically like slow pendulums. Records from these churches show their bells were melted for wartime repurposing years before any war required bronze requisition. Their disappearance predates necessity, an anomaly historians rarely address. A municipal report from Copenhagen, dated May 1889, records that the North Tower's bell rang at 12:03, while a separate astronomical clock in the same square logged the ring at 11:52. The discrepancy remains unexplained. Both clocks were documented as synchronized that week. A witness, a bookseller named Madsen, wrote, "It rang before it rang." Historians dismiss this as poetic exaggeration, but a technician's diagram attached to the report shows the bell's resonant frequency measured at 42 Hz, lower than expected for its size. Some modern acousticians speculate such low frequencies might distort timestamp mechanisms dependent on vibration detection. It rained lightly that morning. Droplets blurred the ink on the technician's sheet, creating ghostly rings around his annotations. The bell was removed in 1904. It has not been found since. 3 other towers across Europe reported similar timing anomalies within the same decade. In a dusty workshop behind the Turin Cathedral, a restored notebook dated August 1871 describes a cast-in tradition older than Rome, involving spiraled interior channels meant to guide the breath of metal. Scholars argue this is metaphor, yet the drawings resemble modern waveguides used in acoustics. The craftsman, Matteo Rinaldi, sketched the channels meticulously, but his name was later crossed out of the Foundry register. Beneath the crossing sits a faint pencil addition, consulted, then dismissed. Some researchers speculate these spirals once tuned bells to natural electromagnetic harmonics. A controversial theory, yet identical channel patterns appear in bells removed from Warsaw, Lille, and Geneva between 1899 and 1905. The workshop smelled of hot wax and cooling bronze. The air shimmered with heat from the furnace. Rinaldi's moulds vanished after 1900. No order for destruction exists. Curiously, the cathedral's modern bell tower resonates faintly at dawn, though no bell hangs inside. A letter from a Zurich physics professor in September 1902 describes a peculiar experiment. Placing a removed church bell in a sealed room, they reported feeling a pressure on the ribs when standing near it, despite no audible sound. Instruments showed a low amplitude oscillation around 18 Hz. The bell came from St. Gallen, removed that same year due to instability. Yet the professor's note claims the bronze was flawless. Rain tapped softly against the university's leaded windows as he wrote, "It does not ring, yet it speaks." No publication followed. The bell disappeared before further tests. Some suggest this oscillation could interact with masonry structures, a speculative link to why so many towers were reinforced after bell removal. Today, low-frequency tests on certain surviving 19th century bells show similar patterns, though official studies remain inconclusive. The sealed room where the experiment occurred was demolished in 1971. Workers reported a strange hum lingering inside the walls. In November 1903, the Paris Conservatory of Mechanical Arts produced a map grouping certain bells by resonance frequency rather than size or weight, a classification unheard of in traditional bell founding. The map shows clusters across Europe forming an arc from Lille to Vienna, echoing, some say, the ley lines described in folk geographic traditions. Though mainstream scholars reject these parallels, the pattern remains oddly consistent. The conservatory's notes attribute the clustering to coincidence of material sourcing. Yet material analysis from 3 surviving bells shows are from entirely different regions. A marginal comment, likely from a student, reads, "What architecture were these meant to speak to?" A thin layer of coal dust covered the map when found in the archive, suggesting it had been stored near steam equipment. Modern researchers examining photographs noticed the map's circles align almost perfectly with major 19th century power stations, built decades after the bells themselves. In Berlin, June 1901, as the city's electrical grid expanded, the Electricity Authority issued advisories about resonant interference with metallic heritage structures, especially large, hollow bronze forms. No mention of bells by name appears, yet accompanying diagrams unmistakably depict bell silhouettes. A superintendent's private memo states, "Remove the older types first. Their response to current is unpredictable." Electric tram lines were installed that summer. Residents reported certain bells vibrating faintly, even when not rung, particularly during humid evenings when the air thickened. Copper smelled strongly in the streets. Some physicists theorized that electromagnetic fields might have triggered low-frequency resonance in older bell designs, especially those with interior channels. But official reports attribute all anomalies to structural fatigue. By 1905, most of Berlin's oldest bells had been melted down or quietly relocated. Few records describe where they went. According to wartime records, bells from across the Netherlands were smelted for munitions starting in 1915, yet an inventory list from early January of that year, before large-scale requisition began, shows several bells marked as already processed. A factory worker later wrote anonymously, "Some bells came without paperwork. Older ones, we were told to bury the slag quietly." Snow fell that morning, muting the sound of the furnaces. The steam rose in slow spirals, echoing the spirals of the old moulds. The slag pit was paved over in the 1950s. Core samples taken decades later reveal unusually pure bronze near its centre, too pure for munitions-grade metal. Some suggest these bells were melted, not for war, but to erase evidence of their internal geometry, their unexplained resonant behaviour. Today, the industrial complex is gone. A business park stands in its place, but maintenance workers report a faint metallic vibration under the pavement when trains pass. Today, A handful of unusually resonant 19th century bells remain scattered across Europe. In Brussels, a bell installed in 1888 rings with a harmonic that modern microphones pick up as a subtle secondary oscillation. In Lisbon, an old convent bell emits a strange aftertone lasting nearly 2 seconds, rare for its size. Tourists rarely notice. Locals simply say the bells have character. Some contemporary researchers propose these leftover bells hint at a broader acoustic tradition, one not fully understood, perhaps intentionally lost. Their fluted interiors and anomalous frequencies appear in distant cities, following no known stylistic school. The same patterns erased from archives now echo faintly in stone courtyards at dusk. When restoration teams photograph these bells, a recurring visual artifact appears. Faint flicker lines near the bronze surface, similar to early film static. Technicians blame lighting, archivists are less certain. A question lingers in the silence. If history remembers progress, who remembered the sound it replaced?